I want to start off by asking you a question. Have you ever been through a storm? Yeah, have you ever been through a storm that there's something that challenging that took place in your life, that maybe perhaps you had been working at a company or you had a job for quite some time and you walked in one day and unfortunately you received an email, you received a pink slip, and they said that we're downsizing, or they said that your services would no longer be needed here anymore. Have you ever been through a storm? Or maybe perhaps you had been in a marriage for quite some time and this person that you gave your vows to, this person that you thought had your back, this person walks in and says that I don't know if I can do this anymore. Have you ever been through a storm where maybe you just went into the doctor's office for a regular doctor visit and they came back and they said, looks like we're going to have to run some additional tests. There's some things that don't look too good. Have you ever been through a storm where maybe perhaps you took a large amount of your money and you made an investment and you were hoping and wishing for a return on your investment, only to figure out that not only did you not make a return, but that you lost everything that you invested? Have you been through a storm? And so I would venture to say that if you're listening to me right now, at some point in your life, you've been through a storm. You might have been through a financial storm. You might have been through a relationship storm. You might have been through a health storm. But somewhere along the line, you have experienced some type of trial, something that you didn't quite anticipate. And so the question is, how do you make it through the storm? And so what I want to share with you, what I believe are 3 things that are necessary to help you to get through the storms in life. And so if you're fortunate right now and you're not in the middle of a storm, I want you to write these things down and I want you to go back to them if you ever find yourself in a storm. If you are listening to me right now and you're in the middle of a storm and you're still trying to figure your way out, maybe you're dealing with some kind of financial issue, you're dealing with some kind of health issue, you're dealing with some type of relationship issue, but there's something going on in your life, some type of challenge, and you're trying to figure your way out, I want to provide you with some steps. I want to provide you with some strategies that I believe are going to help you to be able to make it through the storm. So if you're a note taker, I want you to grab a paper and a pen, and I want you to write this down. The first thing that you've got to understand when you are in a storm, and when you're going through one of those experiences, those life experiences that seem devastating, that seems challenging, the first thing that you've got to remind yourself and you've got to say to yourself is, this too shall pass. And so what I want to remind you is, I want you to write this down. This has not come to stay, but it has come to pass. And I know how it is that sometimes you could be in the middle of a storm and you're going through a challenge. You're saying to yourself that, Andy, I don't know if this pain will go away. You don't understand. I just lost somebody that means so much to me. I don't know if this is going to pass. I've been trying to get a job for the past 5-6 months and I'm not having success. I don't know if this is going away. I've been having issues with my marriage now for 2-3 years. Maybe you don't understand. I don't know if this is going to go away. I'm still trying to get myself out of debt. I don't know if this is going to work. I've been trying to get my business off the ground for the past 3, 4, 5 years. And what I'm reminding you is this, that this too shall pass. Trust and believe that this has not come to stay, but it has come to pass, that you will make it through this. You will be able to make it to the other side. And so I know that sometimes it doesn't feel like that. I remember it was about 7 years ago in September where I got a phone call and my father's health began to deteriorate. And I had to meet up with the lady and I had to make the decision on whether or not I was going to allow my father to enter hospice. And normally when someone's health is deteriorating, hospice is there. And the purpose of hospice is to create comfort for the person as their health is deteriorating without doing any progressive or aggressive type of treatments, because they normally talk to you about hospice when someone looks like their health is completely deteriorating. And so I remember having that conversation. I remember having to make that decision. And even then, I was hoping and believing that things were going to work out. And then I remember a couple of months later where my father's health began to deteriorate. And I remember getting a phone call from the facility in which he was at. And I remember going there and meeting up with my sister who flew in from New York. And we went to go see my dad. And he was taking very short breaths, and he could barely open his eyes, and I was grabbing his hand, and he wasn't responding the way that he normally would, and he just seemed a little weak. And so we got concerned, and they said, well, Mr. Henriquez, you said your father's in hospice, and I panicked. I said, no, we've got to do something. They said, well, no, we're going to give him medication. I said, no, call the ambulance right now. Call 911 right now. And so with my directives, they called 911. The ambulance came and picked up my father, and me and my sister, we followed the ambulance, and we went to the hospital. And I remember them taking him through the emergency room, and I remember him going in and they hooking him up to this machine, the respirator machine, and having all these different devices connected to him. And I remember sitting there and my sister looking over at me and saying, Andy, it's going to be a long night. She said, you'll be here all night. Let's just go home. And once we go home, we'll come back here early in the morning, and we'll deal with this. But you've got to get some sleep. There's nothing you can do right now. They said that they've got him. Everything's going to be okay, and we can just come back tomorrow. And so I remember saying okay, and driving home. And I'll never forget this. I got home. I opened up the door, and I grabbed a bowl of cereal. And I remember just sitting down and eating cereal, and it was very quiet at the time because all my family was out of town. They were in Orlando visiting and vacationing, and I was the only one who stayed because I had a business a meeting that particular weekend. I just couldn't leave. And I remember sitting there, and I probably at the most, I put in about 2 scoops of the cereal in my mouth, and the telephone rang. And when the telephone rang, I saw a number that I just didn't know what the number was. I picked it up, and when I picked it up, I said, hello, and they said, Mr. Henriquez. I said, yes. They said, Mr. Henriquez, sir, we're going to need you to come back to the hospital. And I remember just hanging up the phone. I remember just making that drive back, didn't know what to expect. And I remember seeing the doctor. She was approaching me, and she was trying to meet me before I made my way into the room. And the look on her face, I already knew exactly what the news was. I knew what she was going to say before she even said it. And she looked at me. She said, we did everything that we could, but unfortunately, it looks like your father started to have a little bit of fluid in his lungs, and he may have even had some pneumonia, and right after you left, it was probably just a few minutes after you left, he passed away. He's in the room if you want to go in there. And I remember just going in that room and just sitting there, family away, and I remember it just feeling so heavy, the pain and the feeling that I had at the moment. I said that there's no way that this is going the way. There's no way that I'm going to be able to make it through this. The pain, it was just so heavy. And so maybe you can relate to being in one of those situations, one of those life storms where it just feels so heavy. You're devastated. You can't believe you've got let go from the job. You can't believe that this person that's always been in your life, that they're gone. You can't believe that you lost your life savings. You can't believe that you're facing this lawsuit. You can't believe that this thing is happening. And in that moment, you can feel as if you're just not going to make it. In that moment, you can feel as if the pain is too difficult and there's no way that you're going to make it through. But here's what I discovered from going through that process. What I discovered is time has a way of healing things. What I've discovered is that you can handle way more than what you think. What I discovered is that those type of events, that they have a way of building our character, to helping us to discover some things about ourselves that we didn't know. And you see, after going through that experience, I realized that I got stronger. After going through that experience, I realized that when it comes to life, there are certain things that you can't take for granted. After going through that experience, what I discovered is no matter how difficult it gets, no matter what it is that you're going through, that trust and believe that you will be able to make it through, and trust and believe that it has not come to stay, but it has come to pass. And so today I can talk about my father and laugh. Today we can crack jokes about certain things he used to do and certain things he used to say. Today I can flip through and show pictures, and today I can tell people about certain experiences, and I'm okay. And sure, there are times, of course, that I miss him. Sure, there are times that I reflect, but I can tell you this, that I'm okay. And what I'm saying to you is whatever the storm is for you, whatever it is that you're going through, trust and believe that it has not come to stay, but it has come to pass, that you can handle this, that tough times don't last, but tough people do. And trust and believe that you're tough. You can handle this. Yeah, that you can make it through the storm. And so the first thing that you've got to realize is that this has not come to stay, but no, it has come to pass. That is the first thing that you've got to understand when it comes to making it through the storm. Now, the second thing is when you're going through a storm, well, when you're in the process of going through a storm, the other thing that you've got to know, and I want you to write this down, keep driving. Keep driving. You say, Andy, well, what do you mean keep driving? Well, I can tell you this. Living down in sunny South Florida, we have tropical weather. And it is not uncommon that there are times that we get some really, really strong storms. As some of you have probably seen who don't live down here, you've seen times where there are hurricanes that were on the way of actually hitting Florida, or you've seen severe tropical storms. So it's not very uncommon for us to have very, very rough and difficult tropical storms. And there's been a couple of times where I've been on the highway and out of nowhere there came this just enormous storm. And there are moments where you're driving on the highway, and as you're driving, you literally cannot see more than an inch past your windshield. The storm is coming down so heavy. All you see is rain coming down, and it's hitting your windshield so hard with so much intensity. It looks like someone's just putting some white fumes in front of your car. And it gets so hard, the visibility gets so terrible that people begin to turn their hazard lights on because it becomes difficult to even be able to spot the vehicle that's in front of you. And to make sure that nobody rear ends you, you start turning on your hazards. I mean, the storms get difficult. But here's what has happened a couple of times when I've been driving on the highway, where the storms were really difficult. I'm telling you, the storm was coming down so hard that the highway, the speed limit was about 65 miles per hour. I mean, people were literally slowing down and going about 10 miles per hour, some even 5 miles per hour. And what I'm saying to you is this, that there'll be times when you're going through a storm, and you've been in the process of trying to drive your relationship forward. You've been trying to drive your business forward. You've been trying to drive yourself forward, even in the process of being let go from your job. Drive yourself forward, even in the process of having to deal with some medical and health issues. Drive yourself forward, even in the process of people doubting you and some things that you didn't anticipate happening to you. There are some times when the storm is coming down so heavy and so hard, you're getting hit by so many things in life that you just want to stop. You want to put your life in park. You just want to stop and stop making the applications. You just want to stop and stop trying to grow your business. You just want to stop and give up on your marriage. You just want to stop and say to yourself that I don't know if I can make this thing happen. And what I'm saying to you is don't stop. Keep driving. And you say, Andy, well, why? Why should I keep driving? Because here's what happens. There's been many a times when I was on the expressway and the storm was coming down so hard. I mean, the rain is coming down violently. And I mean, it's intimidating the way that the rain is hitting your windshield and you're having to slow down. And there's a part of you that wants to stop. And I can tell you that there are some people who pull over and they literally park. Well, here's what I've noticed, that many of the times, if I'm willing to continue to drive, if I can just go ahead and drive, now I may have to just drive 10 miles per hour, 15 miles per hour, I may have to slow down significantly, but as long as I continue to drive, what tends to happen is you'll get to a place in which you've literally driven right through the storm. Well, all of a sudden now, it went from a violent storm to now you see just light little drops that are falling on your windshield. Or you continue to drive and literally there's no more rain. That's not uncommon in South Florida, where it was raining like crazy and you just kept driving and now all of a sudden there's no more rain. And so whenever that happens, I always think back and I reflect to the person who decided to just park and sit there and wait for the rain to pass. And I wonder in my mind, how long will they continue to sit there? And I say to myself, if only they knew that they could just continue to drive, even if they had to drive 10 miles per hour, if they continued to drive for about 3 more minutes, 5 more minutes, they would make it through the storm. And so here's what I say to you, that maybe perhaps you've been in the middle of the storm, or you've been in the storm and you've put yourself in park. You stopped filling out the applications because you haven't been able to find a job. You stopped going out and networking and investing in your business because it hasn't exactly been growing. Or maybe you stopped putting in time and effort into your relationship, into your marriage, because you just feel like things aren't working out for you. You've put it in park. You're no longer contributing to the game. You're no longer showing up. What I want to remind you is, if you're looking to make it through the storm and not just sit in the storm, then you've got to be willing to drive even when it's uncomfortable. You've got to be willing to drive even if it means that you have limited visibility. You've got to be willing to drive even at those moments in which you literally want to go in the park. And so, yeah, if you want to make it through the storm, you got to be willing to keep driving through the storm, even in those difficult moments. Even at those moments where you just want to pull over. And chances are you know, or you've experienced some of those moments when life has made you just want to pull over. And so if you're talking about making it through the storm, the first thing is, you've got to understand that this has not come to stay, but it has come to pass. And you're going to be able to make it through this, that you can handle this. The other thing is that you've got to understand is you've got to keep driving. Do not park in the middle of your storm. Do not sit in the middle of your storm and have a pity party and say to yourself, why me? Why is this happening to me? No, keep driving. And yes, you may have to slow down. Yes, you may have to retreat, as my friend would say, but not surrender. You see, when you surrender, you park in the middle of your storm. When you retreat, you slow down a little bit, but you continue to drive. And so what I want to remind you is that when you're trying to make it through the storm, you've got to continue to drive. And finally, in order to make it through the storms in life, you have to have some faith. That's right. And the reason why you need to have some faith is because when you look around at the circumstances in the midst of the storm, your circumstances will tell you that there's no way that you're going to be able to get a job again. Your circumstances will tell you that there's no way that you're going to be able to get your health again. The circumstances will tell you that there's no way that you can redeem your marriage. The circumstances will tell you that there's no way that you're going to be able to take your business and your life to the next level. The circumstances would tell you that it's too late. The circumstances would tell you that you don't have the resources. The circumstances would tell you that you're not enough. And so what faith is when you have the ability to keep moving forward in spite of the circumstances. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence, the proof of things that are not seen, things that you can't see right now. And so even though when you're looking at your business, or maybe you're looking at some things, or wherever the place that you possibly are having a challenge, when you look at the circumstances, your circumstances may be telling you one thing, but when you have faith, you're hoping for something that you cannot see. That's what it means to have faith. And so as Martin Luther King said, that faith is taking the first step even when you can't see the entire staircase. And so the responsibility is on you to take the first step. And as some of you know, I was so blessed and privileged to have gotten married last month. And as a matter of fact, it was last November, in which I proposed to my wife. And here's what most of you don't know, that before I proposed to her, at the time in which, our relationship was progressing, and I started to become very clear that this was the woman that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. At that very time, I was going through a storm. You see, I made an investment in a company, and come to find out that the company that I made an investment in, that the CEO of the company had actually defrauded all of the investors. And so you have all heard of Bernie Madoff and many of the other scandals. And so it was one of those similar scandals. And so here's what happened. And here's a couple of things that I've discovered. Number one, you don't have to do anything inappropriate to get sued in this country. That's the first thing I learned. The other thing was, the reason why I was being sued was because I invested in this company, and what they were doing is, anybody who invested in the company, what they wanted was, they were suing everybody, regardless if you were a victim or not, but they were simply suing everybody in order to get all the money back from anybody who invested in the company, anything that they profited. But it just so happened that they weren't just asking for what you profited, they were also asking for the money that you invested. And so for me, I had invested literally tens of thousands of dollars. And so here I am, I had invested in this company, and I had made a very small, minimal profit relative to the money that I invested. And I was not getting sued for just the money that I profited, but I was getting sued for my original investment. And the way that they were proceeding with this is, they said, we're going to sue you to give all the money back. And once you give the money back, you can file a claim and get at the end of the line and hope and pray that you'll get some of your money back. And so obviously that was a very stressful situation. And it was one of those situations and one of those storms that you go through, and you say to yourself, how is this fair? I don't understand. How is this possibly fair? How could this be happening right now? And it's one of those situations that even to protect yourself, regardless if you thought if it was fair or not, you have to go hire an attorney and spend money. And the worst case scenario is you're going to literally have to pay tens of thousands of dollars of your own money back. And so it was a bizarre situation, a crazy situation, mind-blowing situation. And one of those things that even when you spoke to attorneys, they said, you know what, the way this law is written is just not fair, but unfortunately, they are entitled to do this. This is just the way these situations happen. Whenever it's one of these large investments and people are defrauded, they're entitled to ask the people to bring all the money back, and they start from scratch before they put it out. And so at that moment, could you imagine, I'm dealing with this situation, having no idea on what the outcome is going to be, having no idea if I'm going to have to go ahead and stroke a check for literally tens of thousands of dollars. And at the same time, I'm considering proposing to this woman that I want to spend the rest of my life with. At the same time, I'm shopping and looking at rings, which is going to require significant investment. At the same time, I'm thinking about the fact that I'm going to have to also be paying for a wedding. And at the same time, I'm having other things that I'm having to take care of, and all these things that I'm doing with my business and so forth. So there's all these things going on. And in that moment, in the middle of the storm, let me tell you, it was easy for me to start thinking about, well, maybe I should just put my life on hold. And so, yeah, I want to spend the rest of my life with this woman, but because I don't know the outcome of what this case is going to present, then maybe I should put off sending off this wire to this jeweler to make this ring. And maybe I should put off the other expenses that I'm going to incur. Maybe I should put off everything in my life. I should hit pause on all the things that I'm looking to do because I don't know what the outcome is going to be. And so a lot of times when you're in the middle of your storm, You'll look at the circumstances, and the circumstances will want you to put your life on pause. The circumstances will want you to go ahead and say that, you know what, I don't know how things are going to work out, so I'm not going to bother putting in another application for an interview. I don't know how things are going to work out, so I'm not going to bother investing in my company, investing in myself. I don't know how things are going to work out, so I'm not going to bother investing back in my marriage. I don't know if things are going to work out. I'm not going to bother getting the coaching and the mentoring, so I'm just going to put my life on hold. And what I want to remind you is to make it through the storm, you're going to have to exercise some faith. And I remember being on the phone with the jeweler. And I remember getting to that point where I said, you know what, Andy, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And you're just going to have to deal with it accordingly. But you're going to have to just trust and believe that somehow things are going to work out. And I remember sending the wire over to the jeweler and just deciding that I wasn't going to allow the circumstances to dictate what exactly I was going to do. And let me just tell you, it doesn't always work out this way. But things ended up working out. And yes, I did end up having to pay money, but it was significantly less than the tens of thousands of dollars. That I had some people that went above and beyond on my behalf, attorneys that were with very huge law firms that normally their law firms don't take cases under $1 million, who just decided that they wanted to help me out and take on my case. There was another attorney in New York that went above and beyond and made some things happen on my behalf, and everything worked out. In the same weekend that I was scheduled to go to New York to be able to be there for a trial on behalf of all the thousands of the other people who are also going to be there, who also were dealing with the same situation. That same weekend ended up being the weekend that not only did I not have to bother going to court, but that was the same weekend that I ended up proposing to my wife. And so you see, there are times when you're in the middle of the storm where you've just got to trust that things are going to work out. And you've got to exercise some faith, and you've got to be willing to take the first step, knowing that somehow, some way, you're going to make it through the storm. And so I don't know what storm you're going through right now in your life. I don't know what your challenge is. I don't know what it is that you're facing. But what I want to remind you is, if you're in the midst of the storm, what I want to remind you is, number one, that this too shall pass. It has not come to stay, but it has come to pass. You're going to make it through this. That whatever you're experiencing right now is just a temporary setback. Willie Jolly said that a setback is a setup for a comeback. Whatever you're going through right now is just a momentary breakdown. And John C. Maxwell said that every breakdown prepares you for your breakthrough. And you know, it was Robert Schuller that said, tough times don't last, but tough people do. And trust and believe that you're tough, that you can handle this. And so you've got to understand that this has not come to stay, no matter how difficult, no matter how painful, no matter how devastating, but it has come to pass. Time will be able to heal this. You will be able to make it through. Not only that, but the second thing is, keep driving. Don't park in the middle of your storm. Don't sit there on the side of the expressway. No, you've got to keep driving on the expressway of life. Keep driving towards your goals and your dreams. Keep driving to take your business to the next level. Keep driving for your marriage. Keep driving to make some things happen. Keep driving to fulfill your gifts, your talents, your destiny, your purpose, the thing that you've been called here to do. Keep driving. Don't park in the middle of the storm and wonder if you're going to make it. And finally, let me remind you this, that you've got to have some faith. You got to call forth those things that be not as though they were. You've got to have some faith, understanding that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. There's some things that are around the corner that are waiting on you that you can't see. There's some people who have the ability to go ahead and make an introduction to teach you and show you something that's going to help you through this storm. There are some situations, some things that will begin to happen and shift in your favor. You can't see it right now. You're too focused on the circumstances, but you've got to have some faith. But faith without works is dead. And so it requires you to do some type of steps. have some type of action. As Martin Luther King says, that you've got to be willing to take the first step on your way out of the storm. And so I don't know what that first step is for you, but whatever it is, you've got to do it. And so if you've been wondering, how are you going to make it through the storm? Hopefully you got some value from what I shared tonight. And so I have no doubt in my mind that whatever it is that you're dealing with, whatever it is that you're facing right now, that you will make it through the storm. This has been Andy Henriquez reminding you to always show up for your life. Because if you don't, ladies and gentlemen, no one else will.
Yes, yes.